Welcome to the Exam Room Live, brought to you by the Physicians Committee. Hi, I am the weight loss champion, Chuck Carroll, and this is the healthiest half hour anywhere online today. Appreciate you taking some time to join us right here on Facebook and on YouTube. As always, we are going to spend the next 30 minutes doing our best to both educate and inspire you today. On tap, we are going to be heading back to school. Or are we? That is what virtually every student is wondering right now, not to mention their parents. So is it safe to head back this fall with cases of the coronavirus still spiking? Dr. Vanita Rahman will be here with new guidelines and some guidance. Dr. Rahman, thanks for joining us today. Can't wait to catch up with you.
Thank you, Chuck.
And what about the immune system boosting foods? We're going to be talking about that a little bit as well. Of course, there is no guarantee that you can shield yourself from the coronavirus with a healthy diet, but we do know that there are certain foods that can help boost the immune system. And if you have a question for Dr. Rahman, go ahead right now and post that in the comments section. We will be opening up the doctor's mailbag in just a little bit. Also on the show today, a Renaissance woman, if there ever was one. She is an author. She is an advocate. She is a health success, and that is really just the start. From Veg News and bookstores nationwide, please welcome Jasmin Singer. Jasmine, I am so stoked that you're here.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you.
All right, we're going to talk to you in just a little bit, but before we go any further, let's get you caught up with what is going on in the world. Here are your health headlines for Tuesday, June 30th, 2020. As the number of coronavirus cases continues to rise, so too does the number of COVID-19 patients being treated in hospitals. Many facilities now struggling to find enough beds. 7 states are reporting a jump in hospitalizations of at least 25% over the last week, according to the Washington Post. In Texas, the increase is an alarming 62%, with a record of more than 5,900 new hospitalizations reported just yesterday. Meanwhile, 8 states are reporting an increase in the average number of COVID-19 related deaths over the past week. You can see them listed there on your screen. Arizona and Virginia are seeing the biggest spikes, with each reporting a more than 65% increase in the average number of deaths every day. Nationwide, the total caseload since the beginning of the pandemic is expected to surpass 2.7 million today, with nearly 130,000 Americans now having died. In other news, director Kevin Smith is teaming up with his daughter, Harley Quinn, to launch a new plant-based podcast, Vegan Abater. The famous father says the project is the perfect way to celebrate his rocker daughter's 21st birthday. Smith credits her with having saved his life and convincing him to go vegan after he survived a heart attack 2 years ago. Since then, he's lost a tremendous amount of weight and says Harley Quinn also helped to mend his cholesterol-busted heart. And finally, where's the beef? For the first time in several years, Americans are eating less meat. And it's not just burgers and steaks that are going the way of the dodo. Pork and turkey are also finding their way onto fewer dinner tables of late. That is according to the Food Agricultural Policy Research Institute at the University of Missouri. The decline is being blamed on the COVID-19 pandemic, with prices now up at a time when the economy is down. Beef prices in particular are skyrocketing, up 10% last month alone. But beef is also expected to be bypassed more frequently in the future. Consumption is expected to decline by an average of 4% by 2025. Hat tip to Veg News for the lead on that one. Moving on. On any regular year, in about 2 months from now, millions of children would be heading back to school, eager to learn and to socialize with their friends. But this is no normal year. The pandemic has forced schools and colleges worldwide to lock their doors and instead shift to distance learning to prevent a surge in new infections. And for the upcoming year, many students are wondering whether they'll be reporting to class or the kitchen table to crack the books. If it were up to the American Academy of Pediatrics, the school doors will be opening in just a few weeks. So at a time when some states are beginning to roll back the reopening process, what is behind the rationale? To discuss this, we welcome Dr. Vanita Rahman to the Exam Room Live. Dr. Rahman, what are the guidelines here that have just been released, and what, just talk to us here, because it seems counter to what we're hearing so much about on the news.
Yeah, so this is such an important topic, Chuck, because so many students are in limbo about what will happen this fall, whether they're in elementary school or high school or college. And the American Academy of Pediatrics has issued a statement saying that they strongly advocate that school districts make every effort possible to have school um, available in person so that children are physically present in school. And there are many reasons for this suggestion. First of all, it's been very hard for children and students to learn remotely. It's a completely new curriculum. It's difficult to manage that. Second, it has a lot to do with behavioral disorders or social isolation, lack of exercise. For many youth, regular exercise is tied into school and regular school sports or organizations. And without it, many children are not exercising and they may be watching TV or playing video games, which we know is harmful to their health. Another reason is schools are often the first place where children are diagnosed with behavioral or social disorders. And when schools are not open, it's very difficult for educators to pick up on these and make changes in a student's trajectory. And another reason has to do with nutrition. About 11 million children live in food insecure households in the United States, and school is a primary source of food for them. About half of the meals that children consume occur in school. So when schools are closed, that becomes much more challenging. So it's very important that all children have access to food. Um, and and lastly, if the academy's position is that if we look at the risk for children, it's fairly low that they develop severe disease, unlike influenza and other respiratory infections. Children are a low risk population. They do remarkably well with this infection, and they're not likely to spread it to each other or cause severe problems, even if they do. So the thought process is the risk of not being in school is much greater at this point than being in school. And that's where the academy's position is coming from.
Understood that the risk for children may be reduced, but a couple of things that I think a critic on the other side of the aisle might say would be, well, one, just because they are asymptomatic, does that then mean that they cannot bring it home to somebody who they're living with who might be in a higher risk category?
Yeah, and that is an important question, Chuck, and an important consideration. And that was the thought process behind shutting down the schools. Is that even though the children themselves are low risk, but they could bring it to others who may be at higher risk. While that risk is there, I think we're realizing that there are greater risks to the youth right now when children don't have access to food, when they may not be screened for behavioral disorders or treated for them, when their education is interrupted, when they're not getting regular exercise. And so, the downstream effect of that is going to be much more pronounced. So it's much better if they're in school. And there is that risk they could bring it home to grandparents or even parents who may be at higher risk. But the risk of keeping them at home is also quite significant at this point.
Let's keep on that nutrition front then on this point. Just beyond getting meals themselves, what do we know as far as how many fruits and vegetables the average child right now is actually taking in every day? Because that the health component there goes way beyond what we're just talking about with the coronavirus. And as we've said on the show many times, there is no surefire way to prevent yourself from becoming infected. But we do know that with a healthy diet, your immune system is certainly functioning at a much higher level. So what do we know about the amount of fruits and vegetables that kids are eating that would help boost that immune system?
Yeah, so this is where the statistics are not so great. The average American youth is consuming just about a single serving of fruit a day, a single serving of vegetable a day, actually less than a single serving of vegetables a day. And when we look at nutritious vegetables, particularly nutritious vegetables like green leafy vegetables, they're getting less than zero point 0.1 servings a day. Legumes are getting less than zero point 0.1 servings a day. And other foods that are not as nutritious, like refined grains or added sugar, they're getting too much of that or too much sodium. So, youth nutrition is really key, because the way the children eat now is the way they'll continue to eat throughout their lives. And if we can preempt that now and teach them healthy eating habits, they can carry that forward.
All right, hold on. Did you say that they're getting 1/10 of one serving of some of these foods that are critical?
Yeah, so they're getting, to be precise, they're getting 0.06 servings of green leafy vegetables a day and 0.06 servings of legumes a day. So imagine that.
Wow. Oh, so what are the long-term health implications there beyond just childhood obesity?
Well, I mean, they're severe. If they don't grow up eating these food groups, they will not develop a taste for them. They are more likely to reach for the hot dogs or the hamburgers to fill themselves up. And we know that not only will that lead to weight problems, but it will lead to elevated levels of cholesterol and diabetes, high blood pressure, compromises their immune system. Basically the same things we see in adults, we're seeing in children at a younger age now.
And yeah, I mean, it just goes to the shows that you and I have done in the past, talking about establishing healthy eating habits early on in life. That's really important, and also it's important for kids. Really, not just talking about the quantity of these healthy foods that they're eating, but really to eat a wide variety of them. I
Mhm.
know that one of the things that we talk about so much at the Physicians Committee is to eat the rainbow.
Exactly. And most kids are not. They're eating a select few vegetables, mostly potatoes, not getting all these colorful vegetables that are so nutritious for them.
All right, Dr. Vanita Ramana, I appreciate your time. Stick around because we will be opening up the doctor's mailbag in just a little bit. So if you have a question, nutrition or otherwise, go ahead and post that for Dr. Rahman in the comment section right now. We'll be opening up that mailbag in just a little bit. Matter of fact, we're going to be opening up that mailbag after I get an opportunity to speak to somebody who may be the coolest guest we have ever had on the show. So let's talk about this. Let's break this down, right? My next guest wears so many incredible hats. A quick glance at the top of her website reveals that she is an author, an editor, a speaker, an actor, an activist, a lesbian, and a vegan. And I suspect that really that is just the tip of the iceberg. Please help me welcome Jasmine Singer to the Exam Room Live. Jasmine, thank you so much for being here.
That was an epic introduction. I hope I can live up to it. Thank you for having me.
I mean, it's all you. I'm just saying the words. How do you find time to do all of this?
That's always the first question people ask. And I think that if you itemized the things you did, you would do just as much as I do. But I am very lucky to be a part of so many incredible projects that are all fighting to change the world for animals.
Well, okay. Before we get to the animal aspect, I want to talk about you for a little bit, because you have just an incredible story of your own that so many people find inspirational for all the right reasons. But it's not your typical weight loss story. So many people, they will lose weight, and yeah, that's wonderful, right? But you actually, in a book that you wrote about how you lost weight and how the world began to view you differently. And it is taking us close to 3 years to address this on the show. So I'm so excited that you are here to talk about that. Your book, Always Too Much and Never Enough. What was this experience like for you?
Thank you so much. Yeah, my memoir that came out in 2016, Always Too Much and Never Enough, which is, by the way, a very similar name to Donald Trump's niece's new book, which is called Too Much and Never Enough, but mine was there first. And I am always too much and never enough. And it is a very different story, I'm sure, than hers, because mine talks about how food was always kind of the thing that I went to as a kid. I grew up in those electric 1980s when I was using Cheez-Its and Oreos and Ritz crackers and a ton of animal-based products as my go-to, as my confidant, my sage, my best friend. And, I grew up in New Jersey. I was very bullied as a kid, and food was always there for me. So in a way, I am grateful that I had that experience. But on the other side of it, I was using it almost like a drug. And so it took me decades of unpacking that to recognize that my relationship with food was toxic. And on the other side of that, what I learned in my 20s and 30s was that I can live not only authentically in terms of my worldview and not contribute to cruelty through my diet, but I can live in a way that also is very authentic to who I want to be and how I want to show up as in the world, by feeding myself things that actually give me fuel and can do their part in not only contributing to social justice, but also contributing to my own bodily integrity.
Yeah, okay. I love the way that you phrase that. Food was a drug. I view it the exact same way. Like when I was still 420 pounds, like Taco Bell was my crack, and I could not go a day without it for so many reasons. One, I genuinely believe I was physically addicted to it, but two, it was kind of like that sense of comfort. It was that warm blanket that kind of made everything okay, even though here's this very substance that is fueling so much of the problems I had going on in life. It sounds like your situation was kind of similar.
Yeah, absolutely, Chuck. You probably had a very similar experience to me in that I would sit in the kind of shadowed part of the parking lot at Burger King and eat my cheeseburgers and my French fries and drink my milkshake, and the whole world seemed to disappear in a way that I craved as a young person. But what I didn't realize then was that I was part of a system that was reliant on my willful ignorance to continue to consume more and more and more in an effort to get further and further away from the ultimate health that I wound up finding in my 30s. And that came after a long time of picking apart why that food that I ate was so destructive and so addictive, and why I was able to eat it while not even thinking about the animals whose individual lives were behind the making of my burger.
Oh, it's no surprise that there's a major disconnect between the slaughterhouses and how it gets to our mouths on our plates, from our plates. I mean, if I think the average person were to see what actually occurs and how that beef got there in the first place, it would really open up a lot of eyes. What was that awakening moment for you?
Totally. When I was 19, I stopped eating animals. I stopped eating flesh because I just sort of thought meat was icky, but I hadn't given any thought to the dairy and egg industries. So when I was 24, which was over 16 years ago, I watched a documentary. I learned about the horrors going on for dairy cows and for egg-laying hens, and I suddenly realized that I was part of a system that was reliant on the exploitation of the reproductive systems. And as a longtime feminist, that didn't work for me anymore. So I stopped eating all animal products and I went vegan. But Chuck, I didn't quite learn yet that I needed to pick apart the food addiction issues. So I was vegan, but I was definitely a junk food vegan for a really long time.
Oh, yeah. Oh man, food addiction, it can be the pits. So, but like you realize that though. And I think, as they say in any recovery, admitting that you have a problem is the first step. So when did you really recognize like, oh my God, like I'm truly addicted to food, whether it is animal product based or now plant based? What was that awakening moment for you?
Well, I was 30 and I'm 40 now. So to give you an idea of the math there, I was at the doctor's office and I was being told that I was on my way to heart disease, even though I had been a long time vegan already. I couldn't go up a flight of stairs without stopping to check a pretend text message, really, so that I could catch my breath. And I started to realize that even though I was a very passionate animal activist, I couldn't really fight for the rights of other animals unless I was fighting for the rights of my own animal self. And so at that time, I was given a documentary to review in my job within press, and it was called Fat, Sick, and Nearly Dead. You're probably familiar with it. And it
Indeed.
follows Joe Cross's his experiences juicing and really driving across the country and just consuming raw vegan food. And I was like, oh, well, okay, if it's for a story assignment, I guess I'll review the film and I'll try a juice fast. And then I did, and I started to lose a lot of weight, and I started to recognize at that time the role that the sort of oily fattening foods that I was eating was contributing to my many health problems at just 30 years old. And so that started me on a trajectory of finding more of a whole foods based diet. And part of that unraveling for me included recognizing, as you alluded to before, the way that the world treated me before growing up, and how marginalized I was and how pushed aside I was as a chubby kid, as a chubby adult, and how the world decided it would celebrate this particular group and oppress this particular group, which became a through line in my own animal activism. So once I realized that I had also jumped the fence from the world that previously ignored me to the world that was celebrating me, it brought up a whole bunch of psychological explorations for me. That is partly what I go into in my first book, Always Too Much and Never Enough.
I'm sure equal parts fascinating and heartbreaking at the same time. I want to go back though really quickly to the juicing process. When I tried to kick my fast food habit, I felt like I went through a literal detox, and it could be very rough on certain nights. I famously tell the story about being so angry on my third night without Taco Bell that I put my fist through a wall. You were on this juice cleanse, it sounds like. What was the detox process like for you? How were you feeling physically?
Well, physically, there were some things that I had to go through. My body kind of had to flush itself out. And the first one was definitely the hardest. I find that whether you're doing a 3-day cleanse or 5-day or a 10-day, it's always the last day that's the hardest. So it's also a psychological thing. And it allowed me physically to kind of give my body a break. But emotionally, I had to then confront why I was constantly going to these old best friend foods I had in the 80s when I was growing up as something to soothe me. And that forced me into a lot of self-exploration and a lot of examination. But physically, it hurt and I was over it and it was fun.
So, when you first realized that people were looking at you a little bit differently after you had become this new person, you had this metamorphosis into a new body, was it kind of fun and unique at first, and then kind of the realization set in that, wow, being overweight, you really have it rough in this country?
Yeah, all of the above. I mean, I think all of the above is true. I think I was sort of partaking in a system that gave me those perks, those thin person perks that I hadn't had yet in my life. In my early 30s, men would start holding doors for me and women would compliment my clothes. And I was like, what is happening? Because it's just these little things that don't happen when you don't ascribe to a societal view of what is beautiful. And so it was a hard realization. I remember getting my mail at my mailbox when I was living in New York City, and my neighbor, who I had passed so many times in the years that I lived there, finally stopped and was like, "You look great." And I resented it. I also was like glad that someone was noticing that I was feeling better, but I was very curious as to why this was the first time I was being talked to, and that was something that I explore throughout Always Too Much and Never Enough.
Yeah, it's the psychology it's fascinating and infuriating at the same time, because you do wrestle with this. And I think whether you're a man or a woman, you wrestle with this internally. Like, why am I suddenly now more valuable when there's less of me? There was so much more of me before, and you never noticed. And now here I am, a third of what I once was, and you want to talk to me. Like, this does not make a whole heap of sense.
Well, that took me on a journey that actually extended after I finished writing the memoir, after I finished writing Always Too Much and Never Enough. I finished writing it in my mid-30s, and then life took me on a whole bunch of other adventures, which, obviously a memoir is just a moment in time. But that took me down a road of, first re-exploring my relationship with weight, and was it realistic for me to do constant juice fasts? And I wound up helming editorial for a while for Veg News magazine, and part of my job was to do taste tests and to write about them and to do restaurant reviews. And I started to gain weight again, because no journey is linear, and I started to question how that related to my book and what was my truth now. And I started to recognize that body positivity is what I needed to lean into. And from there came another sort of bout of re-exploring health and what at 40 makes sense for me to focus on in terms of creating my optimal health. It is still based in a whole foods plant-based diet. It is still based in relentless self-examination, and I do still incorporate juices as well, but it's not a linear process. And I am so grateful that I've been able to explore these issues in my writing, because it means that my story is not just mine, but it's yours and it's universal. And as you've probably noticed in your own journey and when you talk about it, so many people come up to me and they say, it's like I'm reading my diary. We are not alone in this. We just think we are. But the fact is, my story is your story, is the next person's story. We all have the same inner demons that we struggle with. We all question why the world is celebrating us one day, and we all question why we're celebrating ourselves one day and not the next. So I find solace in that community.
Girl, don't ever get off of that soapbox. You are on a roll. Holy moly. That is just fantastic. And you know what? I'm so glad that you brought that up, because this is a question that I get asked a lot, and you just kind of addressed it head on. So I want to do a little bit deeper dive with it. Is how do you weigh the body positivity movement, as well as making sure that somebody is healthy? Is it an excuse to stay unhealthy? My answer is always everybody is equal. I don't care if you're 600 pounds or you're 60 pounds. You count just as much as the next person. It's a question of, can you truly own your own health while still being positive and honest about your body? Like, it's even such a difficult thing for me to talk about, having been on both extremes, and you just put it so eloquently. So where is that balance?
I think we have to be careful when we say that everybody is equal, because I think that, like, you genuinely believe that and probably treat people as such. And I genuinely believe that and treat people as such. But we've also done a lot of work on ourselves and on body positivity and celebration. But the truth is that we still live in a world that celebrates fat people, that oppresses fat people and that celebrates thin people. I mean, the billboards that I see where I live in West Hollywood don't have people who look like your average person on it. They celebrate thinness. They celebrate the status quo. We're shifting, but I think that the work has to start internally and with the language that we use. I mean, I use the word fat very much on purpose because I don't see it as a bad word. I think that fat positivity is something that we have to lean into at the same time as we're allowing space for each of us to find our own optimal health, and that when we go around sort of putting other people down because of it, whether it's overtly or covertly, I think we run into problems where a whole demographic feels othered and is in fact othered, is given fewer opportunities. And so where does this work start? How is the balance? I have a TED Talk that's called Compassion Unlocks Identity. And I talk about that in my TED Talk, which is that we have to kind of focus on our own body positivity, reach a place where we can genuinely reflect that in the way that we interact with the world, and then start to recognize the ways we're oppressing other people. That was one of the hardest parts of my own journey, was recognizing that not only was I sort of a victim to this, but I was also treating others as less than. And until we start to recognize those issues within ourselves, I'm not sure our society can ultimately pivot.
Ooh, I feel like we could talk about this for hours, but there are other things on the plate that we need to get to, because it is the end of Pride Month. And one of the things that we've been learning here on the show this month is that there is a connection between the plant-based and the LGBTQ communities. Can you talk to us a little bit more about that connection?
Yeah, I actually jumped to the animal rights movement originally by way of the LGBTQ movement. I was working in AIDS awareness, and I was working to help people to understand that we need a system of compassion, radically so. And so I would go to my rehearsals, and then I would go across the street and I would consume animal products. I was a vegetarian at the time. And the truth is that these are very similar issues. And when I realized that, and I recognized that that though they are different movements, the the overlapping factor is the way we oppress others and the way we celebrate some, I started to recognize that the only way that I could authentically be an LGBTQ activist and fight against the exploitation of a certain demographic that I happened to fit into was to go vegan. So for me, like one example would be, the AIDS virus, which is obviously it became known as the gay disease in the 80s, and it oppressed the entire gay community. And how did we wind up getting AIDS in the first place? It was likely through the consumption of bushmeat. And so we started with the exploitation of animals. It jumped to queer people by oppressing an entire demographic. And then the cycle continued because we were seeking a vaccine to the AIDS virus by vivisection. So you see, it continues. It's a cycle that needs to be disrupted from a systemic level. And for me, being understanding the way the world sort of has celebrated heteronormativity, it was also another important reason for me to understand that, like, as somebody who has been part of an oppressed group, I don't want to partake in the oppression of another group, by which I mean animals. So they are living authentically. We are taking away their lives from them early, just like we have historically done in the LGBTQ community. And of course, that is most prevalent these days within the violence toward the trans queer community.
Let's talk about another crossroads now, veganism and social justice. Veg News was one of the first vegan organizations to really take a strong stand against the murder of George Floyd. Can you talk to us a little bit about the connection between veganism and other social justice issues?
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to make very clear that I don't conflate these issues. I do not think that one issue is the same as the other. I just think that the fact that we get a choice at least 3 times a day of how we show up with our ethics and our worldview by way of voting with our dollars around our consumption habits is amazing. We live in a world where we feel we have like very little control over what's going on, but we have control over how we're showing up with the way we spend our money, the way we vote, and the way we vote by spending our money. So for me, that included boycotting cruelty and boycotting animal cruelty. Another boycott I have is that I'm going to boycott white supremacy culture. And so with my work as an editor at Veg News and with my work as the content director at Kinder Beauty, which is a vegan and cruelty-free vegan cruelty-free beauty subscription box, we don't support white supremacy. And we feel we need to be vocal and direct about it. And we feel that social justice needs to be part of the equation, no matter what you're fighting for. We have to show up as vegans while being anti-racist. I had Dr. Barnard on my podcast, which is the Our Hen House podcast, this week. Actually, it's this week. And he talked a bit about the anti-racist efforts at PCRM. And I think we're very aligned in the fact that we don't believe that one group needs to suffer for us to be able to show up in another realm. It's all kind of part of the same thing existing side by side. One is not more important than the other. And I am right now prioritizing my anti-racist work, but I'm doing it as a vegan. So I do see that all of these issues are connected.
Yeah, and they really are. And I think that that's something that a lot of people are starting to learn now, is just how interconnected we are. And this is just me speaking personally. I feel like if you just kind of take a step back and you realize how many different things are connected, that kind of also makes you realize like how connected we all are to each other. And then again, just me talking, this whole thing about racism is just absolute nonsense. There's absolutely no reason for it whatsoever in a world when we are so very connected. So I really, really, really appreciate the way that you just kind of wove those pieces together for us.
Well, thank you. I do think that we are all connected, and that has been an important through line of my life. By way of my first book, Always Too Much and Never Enough, recognizing that I'm connected to so many people. When I thought I was alone, when I was the bullied kid, you were also the bullied kid. When I thought I was alone in the corner of the parking lot of Burger King eating my cheeseburger and my milkshake, so was someone else. And once we use personal narrative as a means of social change, whether that's through a memoir or it's through personal narrative and essays, which we explore both at Veg News and at Kinder Beauty, as long as we are speaking our truth, then other people will recognize it and they will see that they're not alone in it. So we are all connected, and we can normalize this by actually talking about it, by actually fighting for a more just world. And to me, that starts with showing up as anti-racist and with showing up as vegan and boycotting cruelty of all kinds. And as you know, the boycott is like means you're standing against something. What it winds up doing is opening up a plethora of new tastes and cuisines and communities and causes and life meaning and friend circles and organizations, and it just can really inject meaning into your life very quickly.
Oh, it's definitely such a meaningful journey. Real quick here, we're kind of running out of time, but I do have to ask you more about this podcast, because that's another title that we didn't put at the top of your segment. I mean, that's your 227th title. I don't know how you fit it all on a business card. Our Hen House. What is the show all about? You just mentioned the interview with Dr. Barnard, but what else do you guys talk about on there?
Our Hen House is a media organization that I co-founded with Mary Ann Sullivan over 10 years ago. We've never missed a week of production. We're somewhere around episode 550 now, and we cover all of the various ways to change the world for animals from a multiplicity of perspectives, from legal to medical to grassroots to artistic, and we have a lot of fun, so I hope people check it out.
I think that should be a book, all the ways to help animals. You know, if you've done this for 10 years, I bet you've got just volumes and volumes of information that you can share. And lastly, Kinder Beauty Box. I mean, what a cool concept is this? Talk to us.
Kinder Beauty is an incredible company that was helmed by actresses Ivana Lynch and Daniela Monet, and Andrew Bernstein, who's a longtime activist. And Kinder Beauty Box is a monthly vegan subscription beauty box full of self-care and beauty items, but we're also a mission-driven organization. We support animal rights and environmental groups, and we also have a very robust editorial platform that explores the intersection between veganism and beauty and inclusivity. So I hope people check it out. And if you don't mind, I'd love to mention that I have another book coming out this year, which I hope that people check out, because it is available for pre-order, and it's called The Veg News Guide to Being a Fabulous Vegan. And it is the perfect book to get for somebody who you will care about, who might be interested in veganism, or for yourself, no matter how you identify, whether you're a longtime seasoned vegan or you identify as plant-based and you're curious about how all of these issues come together. We do explore it in the Veg News Guide to Being a Fabulous Vegan.
Yeah, I that's such a great title, especially for a book coming out around the holidays when everybody's looking for a fresh start around the new year. So not only are they going to get that fresh start, they're going to be able to do it fabulously. So I just think that the timing on this, the title of it is just fantastic.
Thank you. I can't wait. It comes out in December. It's available for pre-order, and it's definitely something that I'm hoping can create some waves, especially during this time of coronavirus and during this uprising as well that we're in, where we're all sort of reassessing how we're showing up in our lives and are we living as authentically as we can be. I know that all of the issues we discussed can sound really overwhelming, but it actually is just about doing the next indicated action, doing the next right thing, whether that's to get animal products out of your diet or to start to explore why anti-racism or LGBTQ activism is also something that requires our attention right now in order to move forward as a just and civilized society.
Jasmine Singer, you are nothing if not authentic. It has been just a true delight to have you on the show today. I can't wait to have you back on. I'm going to give you this invitation publicly to come back on and talk about the book in December. I just think that this is going to be just a total game changer.
Thank you. I'd love to come back. And I really am a big fan of all that you're doing and all that you're doing at PCRM and the Barnard Medical Center. So thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it has been my absolute pleasure. Thank you so much. Check her out, JasmineSinger.com, KinderBeauty.com, VegNews.com, on the gram at Jasmine Singer Author. And of course, the book is coming out in December. So many places to find you. Jasmine Singer, appreciate today you being here. Thank you again.
Thank you.
All right. Time now to welcome Dr. Vanita Rahman back to the exam room live as we open up the doctor's mailbag. If you have a question, go ahead and post that in the comments section now. Dr. Rahman, a great question has come in from R. Carter on YouTube. We were talking about childhood nutrition at the top of the show, and R. Carter is wondering, is it safe to have a teaspoon or a tablespoon daily of cacao powder for toddlers because it has caffeine? They're wondering if carob would then be a better option.
Yeah, wow, I'll have to do some digging into that and see how much caffeine is in cocoa powder. Certainly, that would be better than giving a child chocolate, which has more added fat and sugar. So let me get back to that. I want to make sure I know the numbers about that.
Fair enough. While we're waiting for another question to come in, how's the weight loss program going? I know that you guys are what, 2 weeks in now?
Yeah, it's been amazing, Chuck. We've had a terrific uh, showing. A lot of people have signed up, and it's a whole new world doing this via Zoom. But it's been great. We use the chat box a lot. I think last class we had over 120 questions that we answered, so it's been tremendous. It's been wonderful.
Would you believe that? And I had no idea she did this, but my mom signed up for that. She's been in the class.
Oh, wonderful. Well, I'd
I
love to
know.
hear what it's been like for her. Like to hear her experience.
She just well, she loves it. I mean, she told me this just matter of factly when I was talking to her over the weekend. She's like, "Oh, by the way, I was in Dr. Ramon's class yesterday. It was great." I was like, "What?" She's like, "Yeah." Okay, so here's a great question from Anu. Maybe this is one that you can weigh in on. Anu was wondering, can we have some soaked almonds and walnuts first thing in the morning? As I read somewhere that healthy fats first thing form a protective lining to the gut. So that's a little bit scientific, but what do we know about nuts in the morning?
Yeah, I don't know if we know enough to say they're better in the morning as opposed to other times. Um, I would say the most important thing about nuts and seeds is to eat them in moderation. A lot of people who go plant-based do it for health reasons or to lose weight or ethical reasons, and it's easy to overeat these nuts and seeds because they're delicious and they're such an easy snack. But I tell people to really limit them to 1 or 2 tablespoons a day. And especially if you're trying to lose weight or control your diabetes, that's key. So I think moderation is the most important thing here. As far as time of day, I think that really is a matter of personal preference. I don't know if we have the science to say one way or another yet.
All right. And I believe that there's somebody else from the weight loss group right now who's watching. Patty, hi. She says, woohoo, hooray for the weight loss group. So I'm assuming she's part of it, and she's thrilled to be there. So here's the deal. If you ever have a question that you would like answered, don't hesitate to keep on posting it in the comment section. Even though we're closing up the mailbag for today, we will keep each and every question that you send in and try to get you an answer on an upcoming show. You can also tweet them to us at PCRM, at Chuck Carroll, WLC. Just make sure that you use the hashtag Exam Room Podcast. And another question, by the way, Dr. Rahman, that so many people wonder is, where can I find a good plant-based doctor who knows all about this kind of stuff? And the good news is that doctor is right on your screen right now, and you are also available for telemedicine visits through the Barnard Medical Center. How is that going for you right now?
Oh, it's been truly a game changer. I was looking at some statistics. In the month of January, according to Medicare, there were 500 telehealth visits in the United States in 1 week. And now we do over 150,000 a week in the US. That's how much
Wow.
it's grown. And I do believe it's here to stay. It's so much more convenient for patients. They can do it from work, from home. Even if they're on vacation, they may be able to do it. They don't have to drive, fight traffic. If they're ill, they don't have to worry about exposing others or exposing themselves to something else. So it's really amazing what we can do with technology. And I would say, upwards of 90% of things in primary care we can take care of with telehealth. There are some things that we would like to see you for, but for the majority of things, we can take care of it via telehealth.
Yeah, 90% is pretty daggone good. It's pretty good, I will say. And the cool thing, I always call this, because this is exactly what it is. It is the 21st century doctor's house call, and you can do it literally anywhere. You just said from work, from the car. Hopefully you're not driving while you do it. From the comfort of your own couch, you can be in your jammies and have this visit. And it's just the greatest thing in the world. So you can make an appointment to visit with any one of the plant-based doctors and dietitians at the Barnard Medical Center right now by visiting barnardmedical.org. You see that web address on the bottom of your screen, or pick up the phone, call 202-527-7500. Dr. Rahman and her colleagues would love to see you. Dr. Rahman, I loved seeing you on the show today. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Chuck.
All right. And as we get ready to close things up for today, I wanted to remind you that there is a new Exam Room podcast available. And the title of this podcast is Your Diet Helping or Hurting Your Kidneys? Dr. Shivam Joshi is my guest. He's a nephrologist based in New York who is prescribing fruits and vegetables to his patients with chronic kidney disease, even though a lot of his colleagues are saying, you probably don't want to do that. So what is he doing that's so differently? Why is he blending modern medicine with a plant-based diet? It's a really interesting conversation that a lot of people have wondered about. So many people in this country have kidney disease and they don't even realize it. Matter of fact, 9 out of every 10 people who have it have no idea that they do. And that's what makes today's show so important. So if you head over to Apple Podcast or Spotify or Stitcher and look for the Exam Room podcast by the Physicians Committee, hit that subscribe button, and please also leave a 5-star rating. You can get that show and we would be very, very grateful. Dr. Neil Barnard back on the Exam Room Live tomorrow, right back here at noon Eastern. My thanks again to Jasmin Singer for joining us, and our director, Emily Colon, and producers Donna Steele and Laura Anderson for helping to make this show possible. On behalf of Dr. Vanita Rahman and everyone here at the Physicians Committee, I am the weight loss champion, Chuck Carroll. Thank you so very much for joining us. And until tomorrow, please remember, take a stand, stay safe, and keep it plant-based.